Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University.
Welcome back to Civics in a Year. Today I'm going to talk to you about Bill Clinton and the Oklahoma City memorial address that he gave in 1995. In April of 1995, the United States experienced the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in its history up to that point. A truck bomb detonated outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 19 children, and injuring hundreds more. Just 4 days later, President Bill Clinton delivered a memorial address to the nation from Oklahoma City. This episode explores that speech, not just a moment of mourning, but as a civic document. What does it reveal about leadership in crisis? How does it define justice, community, and national identity? And why has it endured as one of the most effective presidential responses to tragedy? The bombing occurred on April 19, 1995. The target was a federal building. The victims were ordinary citizens, including federal employees, visitors, and children in a daycare center. The attack was carried out by Timothy McVeigh, an American citizen motivated by anti-government extremism. This was not a foreign attack. It was not war in the traditional sense. It was violence within. That shapes Clinton's response. When he arrived in Oklahoma City for the memorial service on April 23rd, he faced multiple audiences at once. Grieving families, a shocked nation, and a political environment already strained by debates about government power and public trust. So Clinton begins with a direct acknowledgement of loss. Quote, "We come together today to mourn the loss of innocent lives," end quote. This is straightforward but important. He does not begin with policy, politics, or even national identity. He begins with grief. He narrows his focus further to the children, talks about the children who were lost. This emphasis becomes essential to the speech. The bombing of the daycare center made the tragedy especially visceral, and Clinton returns to this idea repeatedly, not to sensationalize it, but to ground it in moral stakes. He also recognizes the survivors and rescuers, broadening the frame from loss to response. Clinton then shifts from mourning to meaning. He describes the attack as an assault not just on the people, but on shared values. He talks about how it was an attack on our way of life. This is a familiar presidential move, but here it's carefully constructed. He does not frame the event in terms of war or external enemies. Instead, he frames it as a violation of civic principles. He identifies those principles indirectly: peaceful disagreement, democratic participation, and respect for human life. He contrasts these with the ideology behind the attack, describing it as rooted in fear and hatred. This creates a moral dichotomy: democracy versus extremism, community versus isolation, law versus violence. One of the most significant parts of the speech is Clinton's subtle but clear warning about political rhetoric. So he says, "Let us all recognize that we must be careful about the words we use." This is not an abstract statement. In the mid-1990s, political discourse around government power, militias, and federal authority had become increasingly heated. Clinton does not accuse specific individuals or groups. Instead, he makes a broader civic argument. Language matters because it shapes action. He suggests that dehumanizing or inflammatory rhetoric can contribute to a climate where violence becomes more thinkable. This is a delicate balance. He acknowledges free speech while also emphasizing civic responsibility. Clinton also addresses the question of justice. He assures the audience that justice will be done. This is brief but significant. In moments of national trauma, there is often pressure for immediate or emotional responses. Clinton instead reaffirms the legal process. This reinforces a core democratic principle. Even in the face of horrific violence, the rule of law remains intact. He does not call for revenge. He calls for justice through institutions. Another key theme in his speech is unity. Clinton states that Americans are bound together not by uniformity, but by shared commitments. He highlights the diversity of the victims and responders, suggesting that what unites the country is not sameness, but a common belief in human dignity and democratic life. At the same time, he avoids using overly simplistic language. He doesn't suggest that unity erases disagreement. Instead, he implies that unity is a choice, especially in difficult moments. Clinton turns then toward remembrance, especially of the children. One of the most well-known lines from the speech reflects this, quote, "Those who have lost their lives here were the future of America," end quote. He frames memory as an obligation. Remembering the victims is not just emotional, it's civic. It requires carrying forward the values that were violated by the attack. This connects private grief with public responsibility. Part of what makes this speech effective is its tone. It's measured, calm, and deliberate. Clinton avoids dramatic language or overt displays of anger. The restraint serves a purpose. It models the kind of response he is advocating: thoughtful, grounded, and committed to democratic principles. He also speaks directly to the families in attendance, not just to a national audience. This creates a sense of immediacy and sincerity. So, why this speech matters? The Oklahoma City Memorial Address stands out for several reasons. First, it addresses domestic terrorism without turning it into a broader culture war. Clinton identifies the moral and civic stake without escalating division. Second, it reinforces democratic norms at a moment where they could have been undermined. He emphasizes law, responsibility, and shared values rather than fear or retaliation. Third, it recognizes the power of rhetoric itself. By calling for care in language, Clinton highlights dimension of civic life that's often overlooked. And then finally, it connects individual tragedy to a national identity in a way that's inclusive and forward-looking. So, in conclusion here, the Oklahoma City bombing was an act of violence meant to instill fear and division. But Clinton's response sought to do the opposite. He used the moment to reaffirm core civic principles: respect for life, rule of law, responsible discourse, and the possibility of unity in the face of tragedy. This speech remains a powerful example of how leaders can respond to crisis, not with just their words of comfort, but with clear articulation of what holds democracy and a democratic society together. So in studying, we're not just looking at history, we're examining a model of civic leadership under pressure. I chose this speech specifically to also show, we've done an episode previously on Ronald Reagan and the Challenger disaster. Because these things happened in my lifetime, they are what I remember. And we're going to also be talking to Dr. Stephen Knott about George W. Bush's response to the attacks in 9/11. But one of the powers and one of the duties of the president is to be that national figure and to speak in times of tragedy. The Oklahoma City bombing and the Oklahoma City bombing address, to me, encapsulates what a president can do during a time of crisis. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of Civics in a Year.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.